Morning, teachers. I think you are wondering if you just joined me with the fall term recruitment drive. I posted it in a few places. It's an entry point. What is this course? And really, it's a whole school. So I didn't want to distill it down to just a course. But then it occurs to me it really makes more sense if the course has a name. Like there should be a course. So I just did a video where I defended not having a course, and I decided to delete that video and change my mind. And we're going to call this Heuristics for Teachers. And the way to get there is through my worldgame.blogspot.com per the last video that I did, which is the Coffee Shops Network here. Chirality, left versus right, fall term. So this is well into it. Already had 2 kickoff lectures and an orientation before I recorded chirality. That was very geometric, I think you'll agree, and so you've got some of the flavor. But then you're wondering, why is this not math? Is this just a math class? You're wondering. Digital math, Martian math, Neolithic math, casino math, supermarket math. Oh, so it is a math, and it's like yes and no. The content, we have a 40-year record now to prove the content is not allowed in like a US public school for whatever reason. Let's just forget why. And so it's not math that you would teach in a US public school. It is forbidden or not allowed. And I've been in a lot of public schools. I've seen for myself that this concentric hierarchy is not posted anywhere. It's not part of the classroom regalia or whatever you call decorations. This is just missing. So it is math, and yet, because of its philosophical content, we will treat it as a philosophy with science fiction, as a vast literature of shared images. Yes, and more than that. Science fiction is core to what we call Martian math, which is where I'm at right now. And I'm going to dive into an example lesson, example course, actually. And this is the one at Reed College the first time, right? I like this idea when you do teach, whether you're in a location with your students or spread out around the world, or whatever the situation, hopefully it's okay to have a lot of place-based content, not just around, say, you, the teacher. It may be a meetup where you're none of you is like specifically the teacher, right? That could be the case. Let me make this all sort of bigger. But you would like to show Google Earth or one of these and some from space resource and just zoom in on where you are as a student, where you are as a teacher, and then connect, because we do place-based, connect the local time-space to the bigger picture, the bigger story. Because you act locally in your you get up in the morning and or whatever your routine is, and you do your action. You act locally in your current environment. That's your acting space. But your thinking space is not confined in that way. And we like to think in terms of whole planets, and that's a big part of why it's called Martian math, because we grasp that Mars is a planet, one of several. The whole idea of planet, terraforming a planet, and that a planet has an ecosystem as a whole, right? It's not just, that there's weather in your location. It's that every planet has its climate or its makeup, and it may or may not have a biosphere like ours does, right? Probably not, right? Just probability is, given the planets we know about, most of them don't have this gas mix going on. They have some gas mix. Anyway, we're talking about the differences between different kinds of planets. an important ratio here, and a good way to actually start thinking. Here we are outside of math class, but even in literature, we can't avoid that there's mathematics, right? We're going to have ratios, we're going to have polyhedrons, we're going to have this whole concentric hierarchy, but science ratio to fiction, if they're both the same, like they're 1 each or 2 each or 3 each, whatever your scale, then it's like even Steven, 50-50, and that ratio's to the number 1. Now, if science vastly exceeds the fiction proportion of your story, you're telling a story and there's a lot of science and just a little bit of fiction to hold it together, and sort of to help with mnemonics perhaps. Okay, well, that's going to be greater than 1, right? It's going to be a number bigger than 1 because science outstrips fiction. And then the opposite, when it's really a fiction thing with a little bit of science, then that's what we call less than 1. Could go down to 0. We won't define negative at this point. All right, so that's just an example of a slide. You could use this as a slideshow. Now, I actually had a live audience, or more than an audience. We were participants together, me and these like middle schoolers, and I had this website for them. And we'd talk a lot about, these different subjects, like what science fiction do you like? And these are old ones from my childhood that, or before, and they would have more up-to-date, more contemporary memories of science fiction, somewhat on a planetary level. There's big sort of branches or genres that we can sort of introduce and have kids think about. Now, if you've done a lot of TV viewing or reading, or if you've absorbed a lot of stories by the age you get to a class like this, then you have more of a database in your thinking to draw on for examples when you're thinking about all these sort of patterns. But I can just tell them as a preview, if they haven't done a lot of that there's where we go to a world, we being the humans, there's where if we can go somewhere, then clearly there must be others elsewhere who could come here, right? It's almost like a logic. And you could argue, well, wait, no, solar system is an incubator for these different life forms, but the distances are so vast, the physics is such, and the speed of light is such, that there's really not going to be a way to go in between. But of course, we're already thinking that's bogus. We can already sort of see how technology could get us to another star system eventually, right? So this sort of sense that we're going to have visitation, or that we're going to visit a world, that's all very integrated now into our science, not just into our fiction. Now, we can argue, right? People don't all agree on, are they already here, right? There's some people whose, what I would say science fiction story is that we are already being visited and that we're surrounded by alien life forms that hide themselves or something like this. And I'm saying, I'm not going to tell you how to fill in S and F on that scale exactly. I'm going to let you develop your own critical sense. For now, anyway, I'll give you my opinions about this or that science fiction at some point. I do want to draw attention to the Bucky Fuller science fiction. You can see by looking at this stamp, also was a cover of the Time magazine. There's an artist behind this, right, who did this as a piece of art, and then it found its way to a magazine cover and to a postage stamp. But you get the sense that there's a whole world that hangs together aesthetically. The artist captures it very well. And this is kind of a different world than one we ever did get. It's like Fuller's world. Some of it is with us. And actually, this curriculum that we're sharing here comes a lot from his thinking. I point out, since we're on this picture, that the original idea for a dome includes that you can have the rectilinear structures there inside. The critique of domes is, well, we can't put a refrigerator up against the wall of a dome. And the actual response to that is, think of it this way. You've got container shipping, and what Bucky's got in his hands here could come on a ship. And it's a complete interior. Maybe it's just a kitchen solution. This dome could be much bigger. There could be a lot of individual dwellings. But there's where you've got your rectilinear, and it's just you don't have to put so much construction materials into, like you're standing up against the wind and the snow and the rain and the elements with the dome. The dome's taking care of controlling the environment in large degrees so that your internals can be what we would say, we could call it more chintzy. It sounds cheap, but might as well, because the critics are going to do that. They're going to use those kind of words, but more like stage, more like theater. You want privacy, so you probably have some soundproofing. Who knows what you have, but just keep in mind that that was the original concept, that the whole house goes in the dome. Now this is more of a parody of that idea, what I'm showing here, but still fun. Still fun. So do they come here or do we go there? Do we get invaded or do we invade them, or both, or neither? So you get the mind rolling in these kinds of questions and looking at whole planets and thinking science fiction. And that's where we can introduce ways that humans have thought of the world and are continuing to think of the world. It's kind of a mix of like kind of the older alchemical understanding to the newer Gaia hypothesis, and how our thoughts about ourselves as humans on a spaceship Earth, has evolved over time. And a lot of it is in tandem with our growing awareness of these other planets, right? So the poles and so forth, right? The poles at Mars is what I'm showing here, but we all think now in terms of planets have poles. And it's just like as the micro world became more clear to us with the invention of microscopes and discovery that all this Platonic stuff that we'd been imagining as purely Platonic actually does occur in nature, just at a very micro level. We've also zoomed out with telescopes, with Hubble and so forth. And so just as the microsphere has come into focus, we have a lot more, as time's gone on, understanding of what I'll call the macrosphere, or, the galaxies, the solar system, all that. We'll use programs. I have an inflatable planetarium experience to share at some point. I have talked about that. Even if we're out under the stars, we still might want a dome planetarium at our campus. So that is an example of an actual course at Reed College. And then there was another one where, as some years later, I used my GitHub account and hosted Jupyter Notebooks. That's a technology that came along in the meantime. So you see, I adapt this. As Martian math has progressed through the years, I've taken on different technologies depending on what's available. YouTube being another example. Didn't always used to make YouTubes on this material. It depends, what's available to you, the teacher, in your environment, what you're going to use, right? And I'm making suggestions, but it could be that Jupyter Notebooks are completely out of the question for you at this time. You're off the grid, you're in a tent, whatever. You're not even doing electronics of any kind. So what can you do? You can look up at the night sky, you can talk about planets, you can build stuff. I'm just saying there are many environments. Here's the second time we met at Reed, the environment we had there. Lots of computer desks. And this is similar and different from how I taught it years before. Right? I actually feature Python a lot in both of them. I believe in having a coding language, and these were like middle school and above, and we only met a little bit, like for a week, about 90 minutes a day, and it was fun for them. It wasn't like just trying to be, I wasn't trying to be hard on them in any way. I wanted them all to have fun. So I don't think that my experience and environment is what everyone is going to have. And I'm not even saying better or worse. I'm just saying I'm showing you what I have and what I've done, but I'm not expecting people to go out and clone what I do, but keep the concepts if you like. In fact, to keep Martian math coherent, I think it has to be paired up with science fiction because of the title and because of the boost I'm giving it. But it also, I believe, the Martian math that I teach has to include the concentric hierarchy of polyhedra that we have here. And it's like it's a defining characteristic of the math teaching profession in the United States since the 1980s that this material not be included, right? That sort of tells you something important about like public school math. It's not going to include this or hasn't up till now. So there's been decisions made, and I would like encourage you, if you're a math teacher and you're looking at teaching this, to think about rebranding. Think of yourself more as a philosophy teacher, and if you can read German, or even if you want to just read in translation, Peter Sloterdijk, isn't that how you pronounce it? I've heard different people pronounce it differently. You know what I'm talking about, right? Good background reading for thinking in the round. Also, Love's Body by Norman O'Brown, if you're going to dive into literature. There are many ways you may be taking this in your own academy or academic setting, but for those who are new to this material, realize that it's not going to be cross-checked or referenced anywhere in the last 40 years of math teaching textbooks. So even though it looks and feels a lot like mathematics, I think you can make a good case that math in practice has defined this to not be math. So I'm suggesting don't think of this as being a math curriculum, even though it uses the word math. Like, think of the word polymath. The word math is there, but I don't think you have to assume that you're a math teacher if you decide to teach this material. So that's opening the door. If you're like a history teacher, literature teacher, and you want to include Martian math, don't feel like you're necessarily leaving literature or history to do that, to go into a foreign discipline. It's more like everyone can afford to incorporate some core concepts just for thinking about life on planet Earth. Everyone needs sort of a background, and it's not any specific discipline that you have to pin down, even when you start getting into polyhedra. Those are kind of common conceptual property of all the disciplines equally. I'm trying to be democratic here. Don't think math people own this stuff. Okay, I think that's a good lecture for now. And we'll talk in the next. The air quality here is really Portland is just full of smoke day after day. But I think we might get rain pretty soon. Let's hope so. All right, we'll talk to you soon.